Well, hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to be back here in our Global Embassy for Women Leaders. As Kate said, I'm Elise Nelson, President and CEO of this phenomenal organization. We are culminating our 25th year today. So I think that if we look around the world, we know that there is a new weight behind the word leadership. There is a new urgency. And if there is one thing that unites all of the women that you're here from this morning, but certainly really throughout the next 2 days, it is that these women did not wait for the perfect moment to lead change. In fact, they didn't even wait for a better moment. They took what they had, what they could do from where they were, they saw a challenge, and they stepped up to right that wrong. I think if we've learned anything in these last few years, it is that the change we want to see, it isn't promised, right? Progress isn't promised. We have to insist on it. And this morning, we've got rule breakers, movement makers, history trailblazers to talk with us a bit more about this. So let me introduce them now. So anti-corruption expert and former MP from Argentina, Laura Alonso. Founder of Femmes for Freedom, Shirin Musa. Environmental and human rights activist, Helena Gualinga. Activist and president of the Cameroon People's Party, Kah Walla. And finally, senior policy advisor for Native American Affairs at the White House, Elizabeth Hidalgo Reese. Welcome. So, Laura, I want to start with you, naturally. Laura, I want to start with you. You've been part of our network for almost 20 years,
yes.
Part of the Vital Voices Network. I remember when I first met you, you were this extraordinary activist, a thorn in the side of the government. Then all of a sudden, one day, you decide, I'm going to run. Yeah. And you became a member of parliament. And I remember at a certain point, you were you were just tearing down old systems. You were just doing the right thing, but you were almost afraid that you wouldn't get reelected. But sure enough, you were reelected by a landslide. Why is it so important, particularly now, to disrupt the status quo and really call for the world that we want to see, but we need to see in order to fix the challenges?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Thank you, Elise. It's my first time here in the building. I'm so happy and to see you all. And I'm not sure if I still have the same strength, but probably I have it somewhere. I have the heart, so I have the passion. It's always the right moment, as you said. You will never find, if you start thinking, okay, if I do this, if I do that, think it over, you never make decisions. So it's a very personal call. From my experience, it's important to protect yourself. You are the best cause, first thing. And this is part of my learning, because when I was young and I was, trying to tear down the system and reporting corruption and investigating very high-profile, powerful people, I just did it by passion. It was my passion. I believed in that, but I forgot about myself. And after that decade, it was more than a decade, but in public service, it was a decade. It was important. The first lesson I got out from that is that sometimes I thought the cause was more important than myself. And now, if you ask me, recommend me something, you become first. And then the cause that you are defending. But it's the right time for women to step up. It's a different world. When we started, meeting, no Facebook, no social media, no WhatsApp, no Instagram. So this is new. So now misinformation, lies, they can really destroy you. And I saw that change happening. So at the very beginning, we were not thinking about our internal strength, the spiritual side of our leadership. And I think that now it's very important. Because you need the support of your family, of your partner, your friends, whoever. Because if you become the thorn, if you become a very high-profile leader, they will attack you. And in some countries, it can be very difficult. In other countries, they have different strategies. And now we need to think very smartly how to respond to that and how we process internally those attacks. And just to end, you need to know why you are there, why you chose that path, and why you will focus on your proposal and your purpose. If you are focused on that, no lie, no misinformation campaign can tear you down.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, one of the first things that, as you know, we do with women leaders who come into Vital Voices trainings is we talk about the idea of a driving force, you know, that true leaders know what they're about. And we really work to reinforce that because, as you say, there are going to be many people who try and rip you down, either in person or online. And you do have to stay focused and know what you're about. But in so many ways, that is why women's leadership is so important, because it so often comes from experience, right? Seeing something and stepping up and having that internal conviction that is going to drive you no matter what. Shirin, I want to turn to you because, of course, this is your path in the Netherlands. I want you to talk a little bit about the work that you do. It is truly extraordinary. You have changed, you know, basically the path, the destiny for millions. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you've really transformed rights for immigrant and migrant women in Europe.
Well, I fell in love with a guy, a man. It was.
It always starts there.
How he treated me and what he did to me that changed not only my life. It also changed the lives of my direct family members, my parents, my brothers and sisters. Well, I married out of love. My father warned me, don't marry him, don't marry him. You know, I'm a man, I have experience, he's not good enough for you. But I was madly in love and I got married. He was from Pakistani origin, like me. But after 3 years, we separated. And women like me, Muslim women in the Netherlands, we have to marry twice, like we marry according to civil law, but also we have to marry according to the religion, because in Islam, a marriage is only valid if you also agree on the mahar. That's a dower which is stipulated in the marriage contract, and otherwise it's not a valid marriage. So, and if we divorce, we also have to divorce twice according to civil law in the Netherlands. But the religious divorce also has to take place, and he refused to give me the religious divorce. And then you would think that, okay, what are you complaining? You are already divorced according to civil law. But that wasn't the case in my community, in my country of origin, Pakistan, in Islamic countries, because I was still considered his wife. So he disagreed and he didn't give any reason. And I felt trapped in that marriage because I couldn't remarry without consequences, while he could. Men can have more wives in my community, but also in the country of origin and many other Muslim countries. So, but if I would enter in a new relationship or remarry according to Dutch law, and if I would travel to Pakistan, I would be prosecuted for adultery or bigamy. And I was not in that mood. And what I did, I went to law school, because I really wanted to have a medicine for my situation, because I was not the first woman and not the last woman. Many friends of my mother also suffered from the situation of marital captivity. It's a definition we have created to make it a bit sexier, because Dutch lawyers and international, also lawyers in other countries, they call it the limping marriage. And we thought, okay, we will name it marital captivity. And that's very direct. And also it covers all religions, because it doesn't only affect Muslim women, but also women from other traditions. And I studied law because nobody wanted to help me. They said, well, the law is the law, and you have to accept it, leave your religion, or who cares? We know that this exists, but the law is the law, and you cannot do anything. So then I found out that Jewish women also suffered from this situation. and that a woman in 1982 from the Jewish community went to the Dutch court, and then the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, acknowledged her situation as a wrongful act. So when I found out about her story, I thought, well, if she can go to the secular courts, to the Dutch courts, then I can also go. And I will say that this is a wrongful act, but also a violation of human rights. And so it happens that in 2010, the judge ordered him to give me my Islamic divorce and to give him a penalty for each day he refused to give me a divorce. And I thought and said, eat this. Not only, not only to you, Mr. ex-husband, but also to everybody who said that there was no cure. And also to all the husbands who are denying their wives a divorce, who are mistreating them and making their lives miserable. And then, well, my father is also a feminist. He said that, well, he's also, you know, a real Eastern father. He said, you're not my daughter if you're not going to fight for other women and fix the system. And
I like him.
Yeah. He's also watching. You have the knowledge, you know the way how to lobby for change of legislation and do it. And well, we did, and when I spoke about my dream to also change legislation, a lot of people discouraged me that it will take 30 years, and I dreamed loudly about, you know, the European recognition, the international recognition. Well, that will take 50 or 60 years. But, well, we fixed it not only in Dutch law, but also the Council of Europe recognized marital captivity as violence against women. And, well, the members of the European Parliament, they're also considering to include marital captivity as violence against women in the European legislation bill to combat all types of violence against women. And that will mean if the proposal has passed European Parliament, that it will be also legislation in 27 member states of the European Union. And we did much more, because once you know the way how to fight the system change, then you can also propose other ideas for change of legislation and policy. Well, we also went to our parliament and said this must be included in our feminist foreign policy. So, because this is, you know, we are the first country in the world which is protecting their women and girls against this injustice. And let's also promote this abroad. And it's also about a new way of thinking, that, you know, a forced marriage is not only that you are forcefully entered in a marriage, but also that you are forced to stay in that marriage.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is in short my story, and we must dream.
Amazing. Amazing. So, and we're incredibly honored that you've been part of the Vital Voices Network. I know you're a fellow in our VV Engage Fellowship. And one of the reasons I think that program is so important is because one of the things that we're seeing, and Laura, you talked about the rise of online violence against women, the targeting of women. In the last couple of years, the percentage of women has steadily been going up over 25 years, and all of a sudden we see a dip. And, you know, I think about stories like yours, Shirin, and I just think we cannot afford to have a dip right now. We need this kind of leadership that is not just about yourself, it's about making change for so many others. And Kah, I want to turn to you because you, yes, Kah, of course, as many of you know, longtime Vital Voices Network member, honoree, now a board member, but also a woman who has run and is running for president in her country. Wow. Yes. And of course, not just to have power, but to shift power, to change power, and to use it to empower others. So many women, though, are told power is not women's work. And they believe it, sadly. How do we get more women to embrace power, but at the same time redefine it? A topic I think you're slightly passionate about.
Slightly. Good morning, everybody, and thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. Laura and I have been, hugging and hugging because we haven't seen each other for so many years, and I think that's one of the amazing things about being in this network. I think the one thing that is important is that the work we do is lonely work. In your context, in your space, it is lonely work. And when I'm hearing you talk, Shirin, about all these people who tell you it's not possible, it's going to take decades, all of us hear this all the time. And the nice thing about Vital Voices is coming together with women who are like, oh yeah, I'm doing it too, So that's very important. But I think that I have always thought that if we want our societies to change, if we want justice, if we want social justice, if we want inclusion, we cannot count on the people who have built the current status quo to change it. We must embrace power as women. Big shifts, the kind of big shifts that Shirin is making, the kind of big shifts that Laura made, are made within the power of the system. So the first thing we have to do as women is get comfortable with power. The way we have been socialized, we want to stay away from that word, we feel like it's negative, we feel like it's bad, and so on. Power is just the power to change things. And if we do not embrace it, if we don't step into it and figure it out, because it's really complicated. Power systems are really, really complex and really complicated. And the first thing to do is to step in and say, I'm going to understand this. I'm going to understand how it works. I'm going to transform it, and I'm going to use it to build that society that I want, that society that I'm looking for, that society that I'm dreaming about. And I think the way we get women to do this, Elise, is really reaching out. I'm so energized in this moment. My country is a 40-year dictatorship, 40-year dictatorship. The president has been in power for 40 years. Personally, I have been fighting since 2007. How many years is that? 22 years. And there are, of course, days where people feel like it's impossible. This is not going to work. Okay? Until I go to a market, or I go to a group of farmer women, and I meet women who are fighting this system with like 1/100th of the resources that I have. They're fighting to have good working conditions. They're fighting in the market to get what they pay for, to get their little market stall. And you realize that the energy is there, the power is there, and when we come together collectively, and we bring that energy together, we are able to bring down the most oppressive system in the world. And human history tells us this. Human history tells us this all the time. And yesterday we were talking about how the autocrats are afraid of women. Well, statistically, once women get into a social movement, the chances of it succeeding go way up. This is statistically proven. So I think we have to continue teaching. We have to continue connecting power to the daily lives of women. In my country, women will say, I don't do politics. I care about my kids' school. I care about healthcare. I care about the market and how it works. Well, our job is to explain to that women how that is politics. And I am that political leader who says, there's nothing else in politics. That is politics. Helping to make your life better is politics. And until we get it, we have to keep stepping into our power. We have to embrace power. We have to run towards fear. That's one of my, because we are afraid, and legitimately so. In my country, my story, I have been kidnapped, I've been beaten, I've been in jail, I don't know how many times. But we have to keep and I'm scared when I'm in front of a guy with a gun, and I don't have one. I'm scared, of course. But I have had experience over experience that tells me that when I draw deep within that driving force and find my values and look at him in the face and say, you know what, I'm not flinching. I'm not flinching, because what I am doing is what is supposed to be done. Every time I have ultimately won that fight. Sometimes I've had to go through a jail cell to do it, but so I think and my final thing for women is going to be to say, this is the moment. This is the moment. If we do not, in this moment, in the world we are living in, if we do not, in this moment, step into our power to transform the systems, because Cameroon is an extreme case. You guys are in a lot of trouble here in the United States and everything in between. So if we do not step in and step up to power and say, we demand, I don't know the word in French, it's on exige. So we're not asking, we're saying that a just world is possible, a more equitable world is possible. And the only thing that we're going to listen to is how, right? So we have to do that.
Thank you, Kah. I want to bring you into the conversation, Helena, because you are fighting the fight of our lives, the fight for our planet, and bringing forth an incredible legacy of Indigenous leadership in that work. And of course, coming from a generation that has just shown us, what leadership means. Talk a little bit about how you think about leadership and also about your work.
Thank you, Elise. I come from the Ecuadorian Amazon, from an indigenous community called Sarayaku, from the Quechua people. And I just noticed earlier that there's a baby up there, and it made me so happy. Because when I was a child, my mom would bring me with her to all the meetings in my community. We're about 1,200, 300 people in my community. And at the time, my mom was a leader in the community, and so were many other members of my family. And even those times where my mom would try to sneak out, I would always be up before her so I could go with her to the meetings and listen what was happening in the community. And especially my childhood was turbulent because we had oil companies that tried to enter our community without our consent, and it was backed up by the government and therefore also the military. So it was a very, it was a lot of conflict when I was growing up, and for many years my family was persecuted, and there were threats to my family until we were able to take them to international court and win. It set a legal precedent, not just in Ecuador, but across Latin America for indigenous people's rights and the right to free, prior, and informed consent, which has been crucial for every single community that has won an oil battle, a mining battle, any type of extractivism battle in Latin America. So I already grew up with role models around me that had taken it upon themselves to fight something that seemed impossible. Imagine 2002. No one is talking about indigenous people. No one knows about the Amazon, what is happening. And a community of 1,200 people takes the government to court and wins, international court. That was impossible. Everyone told my community that was completely impossible. Thank you. And so many of them actually wanted to give up. And in my community, it was the women that said no. Because if we choose this, we are choosing oil for our children. They're going to be drinking oil tomorrow. And we'd already seen the devastating effects of what oil could do in other communities where the government had succeeded because they had, they were backed up by military and a lot of violence. So as I was growing up, I realized that I was in a very unique position to start talking about this, because even though we had won that battle, it wasn't a conversation that was happening on even a national level in Ecuador or even internationally. And how indigenous people's rights was crucial to defend the Amazon rainforest, and not just the Amazon rainforest, but all ecosystems. There we can see a clear connection between the lands that are protected and indigenous communities. I mean, just in my community, we're 1,200 people, but we're protecting 144,000 hectares of pristine rainforest. That is immense, and imagine that every single community around us is doing the same thing. But what we have to do is to make sure that our rights are respected so that we can continue being the custodians of these lands. Because if we lose custodianship, I guarantee you that that custodianship is going to oil companies, that custodianship is going to mining companies, and we are going to lose the last rainforests that are standing in the Amazon. So yeah, I started to advocate about that and understanding how our indigenous people's rights were being attacked on so many intersections, and how important that was to actually, bring to start talking about it at spaces of decision making, and making sure that indigenous women also were visibilized. Because even in our communities, our women are invisibilized as leaders, but they're the pillars of our communities. If it wasn't for the women in my community, the men would have given in when they came to the oil companies. And that is a truth that they don't want to accept, but they know it's like that. And we can tell it to their face and they cannot say anything. Especially, I'm 21 now. I've been doing this work since my early teens, and I've had to sit in many different rooms where I've been either the only woman or the only woman below the age of 60 or 50. So I've had to really learn how to stand my ground, and I'm always really grateful when I find myself in a room with other women that are leaders and have amazing stories and have done amazing work, because it really inspires me and shows me that everything is possible. But in those moments when I haven't had that, it's been really important to me to tell myself that I am the expert in my own experience, and no one can tell me the other way. Because every time I walk into these rooms, there is always someone who's going to try to tell me, like they have told you, that you are wrong. You're not supposed to be in this room. You're not deserving of being here. You shouldn't be here. You're not right. You're not capable enough. And nothing is ever enough in those rooms. And I always have to make sure that I know that I am here for a reason, and I'm more than enough, and I'm more of deserving of being there. And believing in that, I can keep pushing forward my work and keep pushing through those doors, those walls, whatever that is in front of me that is keeping other indigenous women from being in those spaces.
Fabulous. Wow. Elizabeth, I want to get your perspective here. You are a legal scholar, educator, but of course now finding yourself advising the White House. And certainly representation matters. You have been someone who has fought against systems and now obviously transforming a system. How do you think about, and why is it so critical, to really use our leadership and our platform to fight for those communities that have been historically marginalized, particularly here in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, and I'm so excited to be here today. Of course, I have to do the necessary government disclosure if this is my opinion and my experience, but of course it is. This is my opinion and my experience and my journey as a Native woman in this country, and part of what I, want to immediately say is it's just amazing how similar I think so much of what I just heard is to my experience as well, and it shows just how common I think the global indigenous struggle really is. So in my journey, I guess what I would say is that I have always reminded myself that the reasons that I am doing what I am doing with my career are so much bigger than me. That, what drives me is the hope that my people, my community, my tribe will survive and will be able to be recognizable as a people to my great-great-grandkids. And the hope that my great-great-grandmother would recognize who I am today as also like a Nambe Pueblo woman. And, those stakes, that survival in and of itself are so incredibly high. And I think one of the things that has always been a struggle when you're talking about leadership is that in order to get yourself into a position of leadership, you're often in rooms with people who do not look like you at all. And also often who I think want power for the sake of power or for the sake of ego or validation. And one of the things that I think I always found striking about that dynamic is it was always so much, I think, easier in some ways for me to insist on my presence in that room because, my success or failure at any individual thing wasn't an indictment on myself or my value or anything. It was like, okay, setback, whatever, keep going. Because this isn't a referendum on whether I'm good enough. Of course I'm good enough. Like, I have to be good enough because someone with the understanding of what Native people are experiencing, and particularly Native women, needs to be in this room. And, if not me, who? And that, I think, has always been helpful in driving me to insist on, planting my butt in a room, in a chair, and not struggling with, I think, a lot of the self-doubt that a lot of women leaders who are trying to, navigate their journeys to affect change, really struggle with. And it's been, I think, really transformative and incredible. This battle for, I think, still visibility that we're fighting. I think when you pause it and think about it, there's something really deeply tragic about Native people being invisible in our own homelands, right? About Native people, living in a country that still has somehow this legacy of othering us and treating us like we don't belong or aren't a part of this country. And so I think insisting on our inclusion, on our priorities, on making sure that we are heard and empowered is, long overdue. And I'm glad to see that it's starting to happen. I'm wearing red today. It's because it's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Awareness Day. For those of you who don't know, there is a huge crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people that particularly affects women and girls and non-gender conforming folks that has suffered also due to this just systemic invisibility. And it has been efforts sort of from the ground up, from families and women who are sort of just insisting that people see and take these cases seriously, that has really sort of built this movement up, created visibility around it, and finally pushed the needle on really getting some important changes to happen. And so I'm excited to be a part of that. And I think that gives me hope too, because it's a lot of times women, I think, who understood these issues, who got themselves into positions of power, who were able to affect a lot of those changes.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Well, in the little time that we have left, I mean, I could talk to you all day, as we all know. I could talk to one of you all day. But I would just love to go down the line here and just hear, obviously we know our world is facing tremendous challenges, but you all have stuck in there, got your butt in the seat. I love it. It's like, get the seat at the table, right? To make sure that we can bring about that transformational change. And what is it that it gives you hope to keep going? Because I think that more than anything, that's something that people need to know right now. That even each of you who have been there, when you knew, like, am I gonna make it out? Am I going to survive? Something gave you hope. Something continues to give you hope. So we're gonna start with you, Shirin.
What gives me hope is all those good things we achieve, but also when I see a woman smile when she is out of a situation of forced marriage, marital captivity, and many other things. If she says, "Well, Miss Musa, I made it," and or where I'm going through, that gives me hope. But also in the country where I live, it's a free and open society where I can fight for the rights of migrant women, and we get a seat at the table when we demand it and when we go for it. That gives me hope. And also all the women in the world who are standing up, whether they live in Iran or Afghanistan, all over the world, who are fighting against patriarchy, breaking the walls of patriarchy and the glass ceilings and everything, that gives hope, the progress.
Kah?
Two things for me. One is working at that grassroots level and realizing the shared principles and values. There's no question about the shared principles and values that we have with a massive number of people. So just being in contact with people on the ground, and it makes me always realize, oh yes, we're definitely fighting the good fight. And the second thing is the persistence. The persistence of people. I also, was listening to your red. I'm also wearing black today. We've been wearing black in Cameroon since April 30th, 2016. It's a nonviolent protest in black to remind ourselves that we have a dictatorship to get rid of. And when I look at the number of people like myself who wear black every Friday, hope. So the persistence and the grassroots.
So for me, it's also very personal. I see where my grandmother was, and I see where my nephews are, boys and girls. And I'm in the middle. So I think, there is something for them that is changing, and they are going to be better and improve what I've done in the future. So I think that if I can do that, we can all do that in our homes, in our communities, in our countries, and in the world.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
What gives me hope? What gives me hope is, I think, is that folks are connecting and I think thinking big. And I think thinking big is important and it's exciting. And I think big ideas, particularly that come from women, that come from people who understand the systems that need to be transformed and the kinds of reforms that we need, are so necessary, and they're so exciting. And I'm just, honored and excited to be living in a time that's sort of reckoning with these kinds of really big questions, because it feels momentous, it feels important, and I am hopeful that we will get to great answers and solutions, and that women being a part of that conversation and the decision-making process will help us get there.
Thank you.
For me, I think it's always going back home, and I see that it's still very much like what it was like when I was little, and I still see the children playing in the rain, in the river, climbing trees, like very much like how my childhood was, and that really makes, like, I understand that that is the result of many people fighting, and that is why people also defended our community the way that they did. So that really is what makes me hope, and seeing that the trees are still standing. I don't think I will ever give up until the last tree has fallen, you know, and that is really something that my community has taught me, but it's also seeing that it's not like that in, or what, not hope, but what kind of motivates me is seeing that it's not like that everywhere. In my neighboring communities, there are, at a fast pace, losing the rainforest, and how can we then step up to stand in solidarity with each other, work towards protecting those lands as well. So that's what gives me hope, and also what motivates me.
Well, I'll tell you, what gives me hope is honestly the privilege to get the opportunity to work with all of you. I know you've given everyone here hope, but you know, I think what really gets me excited is the fact that individually, and we think about our network around the world across 185 countries, more than 20,000 women, each with a story of tremendous change. And I think the power that can be unleashed on the world as we come together, that collective power. So anyway, thank you all, and thank you.